Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the DFS Army Killshot podcast. I'm Kyle Marley. With me this week is Liam Picks Fights, and we're going to break down this UFC Vegas 65 card for you guys today. You can follow Liam on Twitter and at YouTube at Liam Picks Fights, and he puts out free content every week. This is my first time doing a podcast with him, though, so I'm excited to talk about these fights, break them down. And how you doing today, Liam? How you feeling about this card?
I'm doing well, man. And, these are the kind of cards where a lot of people that were interested last week have fallen off. They're waiting for the next big pay-per-view attraction. But then there's the guys like us who do this week in and week out. And I feel like that is oftentimes to our advantage. It gives us insights into these fighters that we could take with them as they move up the ranks and as they move on to those pay-per-view showcases. So, yeah, I'm just excited to break down another week of fights. Glad it's not an off week this week. And, we're making the best of a bad situation, some might say.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, this is not a card that people are going to get excited to research for. So I do think they give us the biggest edge. Although this week we are starting late swap on MMA DraftKings. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm going to go a little lighter this week because I can't guarantee that I'm going to be in front of my computer for every single fight this week and able to late swap where I need to. So I'm going to go lighter and then hope I can just hit the combos right out of the gates. But hopefully we could talk about some of these fights, break down some winners, and find these combos that are going to fit. Let's get into it. The first fight of the night, we got Natalia Silva, minus 165 against newcomer Teresa Bladea, plus 140. This is a fight that I don't expect to get much ownership on DraftKings, so I kind of like it for an ownership play. And I like my curtain jerkers for DraftKings as well, just targeting against fighters who are more likely to make mistakes, basically. And I was really impressed with Silva's debut fight. It really just didn't match up with what I saw on her regional footage. And she just made a crazy improvement in her time off before she got signed by the UFC. If that's the Silva we're going to see going forward, I just have high hopes for her in general. And this Teresa girl, she looked house to me. She looks like a good wrestler, strong, but aside from having wrestling success, I don't know how she wins this fight. Aside from just holding her down for 3 rounds, maybe getting a ground and pound stoppage. How do you see this fight playing out? Who do you like in this one, Liam?
Yeah, this is a tricky one, right? Initially, I saw Bladea and I thought to myself, this girl might represent value in the spot just because she's so physical. She's huge. Physicality goes a really long way in women's MMA from everything that we've seen. However, one of the bets that I most regret on passing in the last, 6 months, year is Natalia Silva's debut, because I said before the fight that I thought that she was a live underdog and all these things, and I didn't bet it like an idiot, right? Those are the ones you always kick yourself over. And I thought to myself, she's a younger fighter. She's built up a decent amount of experience on the regional scene, and then she took some time to improve her skills. And she seems to have, a pretty decent skill set overall. She can get submissions on the ground. She can strike well on the feet. She can move. She can go for 15 full minutes. Those are all the things that you like to see. But like you mentioned, there is that one, potential path, which is that, sometimes she gets a little distracted looking for subs and hangs out on her back too long. And that could be devastating when the fight goes to the scorecards. The one thing is, I thought Bladea was an impressive prospect coming into the Contender Series, but I actually bet her opponent to win, I think by KO and by sub for small amounts in that spot, just because I felt like she was leaving some openings. She's not the most developed fighter. She has a lot of raw potential. And so that's the thing that makes this fight really hard to project. I actually think that's why the line is coming in, because fights that are harder to project normally come closer to 50-50. But I do think that Natalia Silva is a deserved favorite here. She has the win in the UFC. Jasmine is another bigger girl for the division, looks pretty big, physical, strong, got muscles, and she was able to maneuver her in that fight. I think skills more often win fights, but am I running to lay the chalk now on Natalia Silva? No, I missed my opportunity at plus money on a debuting Brazilian prospect those tend to go very well in the UFC, especially in the women's divisions. So yeah, that's just hindsight being 2020. But I think that Natalia Silva probably wins the fight, but I think it's too competitive to place a bet on her as a money line favorite.
Yeah, I'm picking Silva here, and I think if she wins a decision, then we probably don't need her on DraftKings. She's probably not going to do enough work throughout 15 minutes to score enough to pay off an 8,900 salary. So I'm more so playing her for the finishing potential. I think she's got a huge advantage on the feet in this matchup. I think she could get a TKO, and I think that she's going to be put against the cage and possibly on the ground often. And she has a nice slick armbar from the ground too. I think she's in play for the submission in any round. So at low ownership, I'm expecting her to be like around 10% owned. I'm okay getting a little bit of leverage there and just hoping she can get a finish in this one, because I just don't think Bladea is good enough yet. Like she can't even go out and drink after this fight. So I just think we've yet to see the best of her. I don't think it's going to be in this fight. She'll probably stick around in the UFC for a long time because having a wrestling background is very good, and you can control where the fight takes place. I just don't know that Silva is the right opponent for her right now. So I'm taking Silva to get a finish in this one, but I'm okay going overweight to either side. If Bladea does win this fight, she's going to score well because it's going to be 2 or 3 rounds of grappling success, lots of takedowns. She has a win on the amateur scene over Lucy Kutilaba. That was a weird fight because there was like no ground game. So the whole fight, she's just getting takedowns, and then as soon as it's on the ground, they stand them back up. So her whole thing was just going right back in for the takedown, getting stood up. So it's good at least to see that she can do that throughout the course of 15 minutes. If she's not doing a lot on the ground, or if Silva can get back up, she can keep chain wrestling and rack up 5 to 10 takedowns in this fight if she's able to win and really break the slate. So I'll just go overweight as a whole to this fight, but Silva's my preferred play. Probably went too long on this fight, to be honest with you, but hopefully it's a sneaky one that we can actually make some money with on DraftKings.
Hell yeah.
Next one, we do have fighter interested in. We got Brady Hiestand minus 170 against Fernie Garcia plus 145. Hiestand is my preferred play in this one because I like the guys who can go out there and wrestle and grapple hard for a full 15 minutes. He is that guy. He scored 78 points in a loss against Ricky Turcios in the tough finale. So if he gets a win in that one, that's 108 points right there. I think this is a fight where he needs to have a lot of that same success, where he needs to get to the fight to the ground early and often, because Garcia probably has the striking edge here. How do you see this fight playing out, and are you going to be high on Hiestand this week?
You know, this is a tricky one for me to project out because we've got Brady coming in here off a little bit of a layoff since that Turcios fight. And it was also a fight, I believe, in which, he got a surgical repair on his knee in the aftermath. I think he had some knee problems for a while and got those repaired, but kind of difficult to know what that's going to look like. You'd like to think he's going to come back and look the same, if not better, because he's going to have that full functionality, but it's just a little bit remains to be seen there. Sometimes we see people come back off injuries and they're not the same. So just want to, say in terms of looking for a favorite, that's the one thing that's a little bit dicey, but he's back out there and he should have a grappling advantage in this spot. But I didn't think that Fernie Garcia looked terrible in the Journey Newson fight in the grappling. He was able to quickly pop back up to his feet most of the time when taken down. But, with striking being his forte, he wasn't really able to implement his game very effectively there. And he got caught with a couple big, kicks from Journey Newson that he never saw coming. So I do think that at 30 years old, Fernie's still got a lot of things he's got to put together here in order to make a run, whereas Brady has a game that's a little bit more functional for modern MMA, just grabbing a hold of somebody, trying to stick to them, do damage while on top. And he also is willing to throw down on the feet. I think sometimes to his detriment, but he's willing to stand in the pocket and throw hard punches himself. So I think he gives himself a chance to win on the feet. I don't think Fernie has lights out defense, but I do think Fernie is the much more potent offensive striker on the feet. He doesn't have the greatest natural power. I noted that about his regional tape. Just lands a lot of clean shots and doesn't put that many guys down. But he is, going to be able to land cleanly on Brady while they're on the feet. So that for me is a little bit nerve-wracking. I would almost feel more comfortable from a betting perspective entering live on Brady If I see that he's doing well in round one, I'd rather pay more juice with more information. But I think that this is a fight I won't be very high on. Truthfully, I think that Brady would be the side though if I was to play it. Just I'm a little bit nervous about what we see here. He's a lot younger than Fernie. Fernie's a lot more experienced than him in MMA overall, and I'm just a little bit worried about some of what I saw against Ricky Turcios, who isn't a big power puncher and was landing huge shots on him in round 3. So just a little bit concerning.
Yeah, all great points, actually. And I'm definitely not sold on Hiestand as a fighter. I just think on DraftKings, that's where he's always going to make the most sense, because if he wins the fight, he's got a path to 100+ points, whether that be a finish or a decision win. And I think that's the same here, because he's going to have to go out there, get takedowns in every round here. And if he's able to do that, I think he's going to pay off this $8,500 salary. I think he has one of the higher ceilings on the card at $8,500. So I'm going to end up being high on him. If I'm high enough to make him a core play, I'll end up getting some exposure to Garcia, because I think he's in play for a knockout. Hiestand is hittable. Garcia's got some power. I just think it would be more from like Hiestand failing at takedowns and just getting pieced up on the feet in the a referee stoppage, something like that. But I do give Garcia the striking edge here, and I don't think people are going to be rostering him. I do think he's knockout or bust, though, for DraftKings, because he's not going to be going out there putting up high volume. He's not going to be landing takedowns throughout the fight. So we're really relying on a first or second round knockout for Garcia to make the 100K lineup. Really not something I want to target, but if I have a lot of Hiestand, I don't want to completely go down with the ship if he loses. So I'd get a little bit of Garcia if that's the case. But give me Hiestand in that one. I think he wins unanimous decision. Ooh, next one on the card, we got a pick'em fight. Maria Oliveira minus 110, and Vanessa Demopolis minus 110. This is basically a striker versus grappler matchup, but the grappler does not have wrestling to dictate where the fight takes place. Who do you like in this one? How do you see it going down, Liam?
This is a tricky one, because the Vanessa Demopolis Jinyu Frey fight is very puzzling to me. When Vanessa shot takedowns in that fight, she hit a double leg that looked effortless, and then she never shot another double leg again in the fight. And I was like, just baffled by the strategy there. But she ends up winning the fight anyway, mostly on the feet as well against Jinyu Frey. And we just saw what happened to Jinyu Frey in the Polyana Vienna fight. But Vienna, has knocked out women before. That's not something new to see. She's got power for the women's division. Now, when I look at this fight, Maria Oliveira, I don't know how much real power she's throwing with. She stands very upright when she throws, but she's touching a lot. So when it comes to women's MMA decisions, moving your feet and throwing, a lot of strikes could be the route to winning. She's also got a huge reach advantage, as you see on the screen here. So if the fight stays on the feet, Vanessa Demopolis, I always like to say, has never met a punch she wanted to defend. She just walks into him. And I do think, though, like, Maria Oliveira shows a submission loss by armbar on her resume, and Vanessa Demopolis is probably the best grappler she's ever fought. If this fight gets to the ground, she's probably going to lose. And the one thing about Vanessa is, like, does she have that Charles Oliveira factor in women's MMA, where after Silvana Gomez Juarez literally whomped her and just like flatlined her, she goes into the guard, and then, what is it, a minute and a half later, she's getting overhook armbarred, from the full guard by a girl who's half unconscious. I definitely think that Vanessa, in this spot can get the submission. The takedown that she got against Jinyu Frey, if she hits that here, I think she could probably pass and finish. So it's just a tricky fight for me to project out, because it's one of those fights where you look really foolish if you pick Vanessa Demopolis and she never gets a takedown. She'll probably just get bopped on the feet. But I also think, for whatever it's worth, she's a tough, gritty girl. I saw her get her ass beat by Lupe Godinez and just like stay in the fight, be tough enough to come back and start winning some rounds, in the 4th and 5th. So she's had some real experience in MMA. She's fought some tough chicks. I think that she could win this fight. So I understand why it's a very close line. I didn't touch the plus 100 that's out there. I would like a little bit more plus money if I was to get involved, but I do think Vanessa Demopolis has a chance to win the fight. So I like Vanessa as the side.
Yeah, I'm cool with that, but I think she's going to have to get a submission. Really, I think it's finish or bust on both sides. I think Demopolis is going to need a submission to have any chance at the 100K lineup, because we've seen she just does not have the wrestling to go out there and get takedowns in each round and score well in a decision. She also is not going to be a high volume striker. The higher volume striker will be Oliveira here, but she's not even going to be high enough to score 100 plus points in a decision. So she's really knockout or bust in this one. We do have plus 140, fight doesn't go to a decision. And I think both of these ladies will be, around 10% ownership. So another one where I'm okay with either side as an owner's play, but it would be more so as the sixth spot in my lineup, where if I have 8.2K left, I'm fine putting in Oliveira and just hoping that she goes out there and gets a knockout at 9% ownership. And then it's smooth sailing from there. And same thing goes for Demopolis. She could get a submission in the first round and really break the slate at 8K, but I just don't trust that she can get it to the ground. So if for me, it's going to be, I'm going to let the optimizer kind of control this one and let it have its way. But I just don't want to have more than 15 to 20% of either side in this one. Did you have something you want to add in this?
Yeah, Marina Rodriguez isn't out there knocking out all these girls in the first round, right? Like, she's normally a touch volume kind of fighter. And she finished this girl being knocked out in round one. So it's just like, I wouldn't put anything past Maria Oliveira. She's looked a lot better in her recent fights. But just like, if she gets hit hard, would anybody be really surprised if she just decided that's, all right, thanks anyways, like, I'll see you guys next time? Because that's what she did in that fight on the Contender Series. So I do think, once I've seen that once, I'm not gonna discount the possibility it can happen again. I think that's another reason why this line should be close, if not Vanessa a slight favorite.
Yeah, I don't hate that. But yeah, for me, it'll kind of be, I'll let the salary decide. If I have 8K left, Demopolis will be in my lineup. If I have 8.2K left, Oliveira will be in there. But overall, this is probably a fight we want to avoid and just hope that it hits the scorecards, and it really won't even matter who wins if that's the case. All right, next one on the card, we have Miles Johns minus 170 against Vince Morales plus 145. Johns is taking this one on short notice. I did pick him as the side here, but I don't feel confident about it. He hasn't scored well on DraftKings yet. And same thing goes for Morales. Morales has only scored well once when in a first round knockout. He's got two of these. Either one of these guys scores well this weekend. Who do you like?
Yeah, I think this is a tricky fight to call because you got two guys that have drastically underperformed, in the UFC. I think Vince Morales is staring on the window of a 3-5 run. If he loses this fight, he'll probably be cut if that's the case. And Miles Johns, on the other hand, I've always felt like he's had a little bit of fraudulent vibes, if I'm telling you the truth. Like, after, I did cash on John Castaneda in that last one, but the Kevin Natividad fight, and we'll talk about Kevin later on the card, but like, he was winning that fight. He was winning it pretty cleanly, but then he grabs Kevin by the glove and throws an uppercut from Hades that he had no chance to block. It was just a clear foul. Referee completely missed it, and Kevin's, asleep. So what are they going to do? Wake him up and tell him he won? Like, it was a tough situation, but, I just felt like from that point on, I was like, seeing that Miles Johns starts to get a little tired, starts to, look for a little bit of cheap ways to win the fight. And, Vince Morales, he does normally stick around for the full 15 minutes, but Miles Johns does throw leg kicks, which is the one way to get Vince out of there. He's a tough guy. He'll cover up. He's not easy to knock out, but you can definitely put the leg kicks to Vince Morales and make him second guess why he's out there. I do think the problem with backing Vince here, it's, Vince late, I understand. Like, I think he could definitely come back to win this fight, but I think the wrestling upside is all with Johns early. I just think he's a little bit better, a little bit more physical in those realms. I don't think he's that great at controlling on top. I think the fight will be decided by the striking in the end, but I also think that Miles has a decent amount of power. He throws a better amount of volume most of the time than Vince. So I think Miles is probably the side here, but I don't trust him. I don't trust him at all. I think he's going to get knocked out again in the UFC, and if it happens in round 3 here against Vince Morales, I won't be that surprised. So I'm not going to be heavily invested in him either, but I do think he has more upside, I would say.
Yeah, completely agree. I think he just has more ways to get there because he's the wrestler. He can rack up takedowns. He's only landed one takedown in one fight, so that's not something you like to see from a wrestler, but he does have the wrestling potential. He's got the leg kicks as you mentioned, and Morales does not like those. And he's also got the power edge. I think Morales is in play for the knockout, but that's the only way he gets there. And I think Johns is more powerful, more likely to get the knockout. So Johns is my preferred play in this one. I really don't want much exposure at all to Morales, but I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him get that knockout really in any round, but I do think it would be more likely late, as you mentioned. And if he gets a third round knockout in this one, I would guess he's losing the first and maybe the second round also. And that might not do it as a third round knockout. So I'm going to do my best to fade Morales, but if he makes it in one or two of my lineups, then so be it. Next one on the card, we got Ricky Turcios, minus 155 against Kevin Natividad, plus 135. Man, Turcios had an awful showing in his last fight where he landed 27 of 235 strikes. I mean, that's terrible. That's pretty much unheard of. But the fact that he's throwing 235 strikes is something that I like to see. He's also got a ground game. He went 0 for 2 in takedowns in that fight. He's a fighter who will go hard for 15 minutes. And that's what I like. Ultimately, that's why I picked him in this fight. But who do you like in this one, Liam? How do you see it playing out?
Yeah, I think that, people gave Ricky a lot of grief for that last fight, and for good reason, right? He did not land a lot of strikes. But you go back and you look through the record. I'm just going to read off. Draco Rodriguez landed 11 strikes before he was knocked out by Amin Zahabi. Vince Morales, in a unanimous decision win, 59 strikes on Amin Zahabi. Ricardo Ramos, 42 strikes on Amin Zahabi when he won that fight by knockout in round 3. Late in the fight, might I add. And then Reginaldo Vieira in 2017, when he first came to the UFC, landed 64 strikes. So nobody's out there like just bopping up Amin Zahabi. He's not easy to land on. He negates volume. I bet on Amin Zahabi pretty big in that fight against Ricky because I just thought the line was wide. You got a guy who's been in the UFC since 2017. His brother is like half the architect behind GSP. And we're saying that he's got like a 0% chance to beat Ricky Turcios. I didn't buy that. Ricky still very young in his career, still very young in his UFC tenure. But Kevin Natividad is the kind of guy you should be in there with that he could beat, that he could potentially get a showcase win against. Kevin, I feel like he's been the victim of, like I just mentioned, a clear foul that cost him his consciousness and was like big damage. Like he's taken big shots. Danabat Gari really hurt him, put him down bad with big shots. And it does make me question, can he take strikes from heavy hitters at the UFC level? The UFC is doing Kevin a little bit of a favor too. They're like, there's this guy who landed 23 strikes in his last fight. Like, Kevin, we're trying to get you to the finish line here, buddy. So I think that this is a fight where if Ricky's smart, he's going to try and mix in his grappling. He's going to try and keep the pace very high on Kevin because Kevin does have power and he's willing to throw. So Ricky doesn't want to just stand there and get shimmed. He's been knocked out before in his career. It's not common. He's got good durability, but we've seen guys like Manny Martinez, the UFC level guys, put him down before. So I don't think that he's above reproach. We just saw he got schooled on the feet. I don't think he's like the lock of the week, take him to the bank every time. But I do think this is a winnable fight. This is a showcase style matchup. He's the ultimate fighter winner. They want those guys to do well. They put them in good, winnable situations. They favor those guys from the show. They've already done a lot of marketing, put a lot of dollars behind these guys. Kevin Natividad, with all due respect, is a fairly forgettable UFC fighter. Guys like me and you have seen all the tapes, so we know from Danabat Gari's highlight reel what this guy's capable of doing, which is getting finished in the first round, getting finished in the third round, getting beat up by Miles Johns for the whole fight. I feel like Kevin Natividad's got a lot to prove here. Maybe he comes out here, shows a whole new product. Based on what we've seen, I have to go Ricky Turcios here. He's one of my more confident leans of the week because this is such a volatile fight card, but I do think that Ricky gets the job done.
I agree again. And I think that Natividad is similar. He's just like Morales and Garcia. Like, they're all knockout or bust to me. None of them are going to be blowing the doors off with their volume. I doubt any of them land more than 1 or 2 takedowns throughout the whole fight. So I don't want any of them, but it could come down to, one of them does get a first round knockout and they're on the ultimate, they're on the 100K lineup. So I'm fine with like a 10% exposure to any of them. They're all going to be more so MME plays for me, where I'm going to let the optimizer control it for me, and they're not going to be people that I'm making a point to get in my hand builds. Turcios is a guy that I just like the volume. If he can land half the shots that he threw in his last fight and a takedown or so, I think he can have enough points in a decision win here to possibly hit the optimal lineup. Maybe he can get over 100 points. He had 120 DraftKings points against Hiestand in that decision win. I wouldn't expect the same type of pace in this fight because Hiestand was initiating a lot of that grappling, and I don't see Natividad doing the same thing. But if Turcios can have wrestling success of his own, I like him to strike at a high pace on the ground. I like him to possibly get a submission. So Turcios is going to be my preferred play here, and I do like him on DraftKings because he's not too hard to afford. What do we got him at? 8,600. That's not too bad. I do prefer Hiestand for 100 cheaper, but I also expect Hiestand to be higher on. So I'm fine with either one of them, if not both. All right, next one on the card. We have a fight I'm really not too interested in. We got Marina Morose minus 190 against Jennifer Maia plus 160. I mean, Morose is priced at 9K, so it's just, she's basically getting priced out of my player pool here because I don't expect her to land many takedowns here or have the ground success that she had in her previous fights. So I don't really care for her price tag. And then Maia's just not a scorer on DraftKings. Who do you like in this one? Do you see this playing out any different? Do you think this is going to be a decision fight?
Yeah, this has split decision written all over it, man. I don't really find myself backing either of these ladies too often. I think that Marina Morose historically was not as good a fighter as she's been in her most recent fights. You know, she does seem like she's more aggressive, more assertive in her fights. But I also think that, you know, on the other side, Jennifer Maia been fighting a lot tougher level of competition, been in there with a lot more seasoned fighters. She's just not very dynamic in any position, you know. She's not very lethal with her submission game. You know, she's not pursuing a lot of subs. When she took down Valentina, she basically just like stuck to her, you know? So if you're looking for somebody that has a chance to go out there and just, you know, maybe get a body lock, land on top and end the rest of the round on top, maybe Jennifer Maia's the play. But just outside of that, she's pretty tepid with her kickboxing volume, comes forward, throws pretty plotting combinations. So for me, it's a fight where Jennifer Maia is going to land a bunch of shots. Like if somebody gets cut in the first round, it's over. They lost already because now they're going to be bleeding the rest of the fight. It's happened to me before where I thought that Jessica I think it was, beat Jennifer Maia. I thought she pretty clearly outboxed her, but she was bleeding from a head clash. That was the end of the fight for me. So I feel like in this spot, you know, it's probably a fight where I'm not going to touch it either way. Not from DraftKings. I'm not going to bet on it. You know, I might. It's questionable. It's on my questionable whether I'll even watch this fight. Not a very good fight.
I completely agree with everything. I'm not sold on watching it. I definitely don't want to use them in DraftKings. So this is my fade of the week. I just don't want exposure to either one of these two. We got minus 300. Fight goes to a decision. That's 75% chance that this one's going to go the distance. And if that's the case, the winner's probably not going to score well. So the only reason you're playing this fight would be because nobody else is. It's MMA. Something crazy could happen. And that's just a much easier path to the 100K lineup if one of them does go out there and tear their ACL in the first round or something like that. So that's the only reason I could think of to use it, but I'm going to try and full fade that whole fight. All right, next one on the card. We got one I'm more excited to watch, but I'm also not too excited to play on DraftKings. We got Charles Johnson minus 165 against Zhumagulov plus 140. I'm really not excited about it because I'm picking Johnson in this one because I think he has the striking edge. And if he goes out there and wins a striking-based decision, I just don't see how he scores well. So this is going to be another fight to fade for me. The knockout's in play for him. I think the possible wrestling win is in play for Zhumagulov. But since I'm picking Johnson to win a decision in this one, I'm going to try and avoid this one on DraftKings as well. Make my player pool as small as I can and hope that I'm right on this card. But how do you see this fight playing out?
You know, I actually think that Zalgas is probably a live underdog this weekend. And I haven't gotten to the betting window yet. I still have to do a little bit more due diligence. But the truth is, like, you know, we saw kind of an archetype to beat Charles Johnson in the last fight. Like, just grab a hold of this guy, grab a hold of the rear waist cinch. You got 15 minutes. If you could do it for 15 minutes, you could beat this guy. That just seems like a pretty clear game plan. And one of the things that you notice about Zhalgas, if you go back and look at his resume, he's fought a lot of guys that are similar size to him. And that makes it very difficult to get your grappling game going. In MMA, you got to use some level changes, some feints. You don't want to get hit with a knee. You don't want to get hit with an uppercut. So you really want to disguise your entries. And when you have somebody who's a little bit taller in the small octagon and you can back them up to the fence, just makes it a lot easier to get in on a double leg, a single leg, to get in on your body lock entries and get an inside trip. Just makes it a lot easier. I feel like Zhalgas might be able to put that to good use. You look at his run through the UFC, it looks a lot worse on paper than it really was. He shows a lot of losses, but you watch the fights, it's been very competitive in almost all the fights. And even the fights where, doesn't come his way, he's showing he could get takedowns. He could land it at a similar volume, match volume with most of his opponents. So I felt, completely robbed, to be truthful with you, against Molina. I had a lot of money on Zhalgas that night at plus 160. Couldn't believe it when they read that scorecard. But we are seeing a little bit in MMA. The volume is going to matter more sometimes than the control. So you want to make sure you're scoring points, as they say, and just landing a couple shots while you're on the ground. I think Zhalgas is a smart enough guy to learn from that experience, come out here, throw some more volume, try and get more and more takedowns. And Charles Johnson was limited to 0.8 significant strikes per minute in this last fight. He wasn't able to throw any volume at all. He says he's going to be more assertive here, come out dancing, talking, doing whatever. If that works, God bless him for it. He made the adjustments. But until I see that, they're saying he's like basically 60+% to win this fight against a guy who's been there, done that, had a lot of tough fights in the UFC. And look at the quality of grapplers: Amir Albazi, Howley and Paiva. These are brown and black belts. These are talented guys, difficult to grapple. I think that Charles Johnson in this spot, he has shown against guys that are relatively young and inexperienced, he could still be out-grappled if you get a hold of him, if you get to certain positions. So I think that that's what we're going to see from Zhalgas, a pretty targeted game plan. And he could get messed up if this fight stays at range. But I think if he closes the distance, he's shown he can even out-grapple bigger guys like Jerome Rivera, who's not a UFC quality fighter, but a lot of guys were going to the third round, going to decision. He took care of him accordingly there. So I think that Zhalgas is going to come out here with his wrestling shoes and headgear. I think he gets the win.
Yeah, I mean, you sold me a little bit. I would put Zhalgas over those 3 knockout or bust guys because I think he could put up the same amount of volume in a striking-based decision, score as much as they could, but it's the wrestling that we're really targeting. He could get takedowns on each round. I mean, I just don't think he's anywhere near a Makayev. I don't see him being able to have anywhere near that sort of success, but if he can land 1 takedown in each round, that's the path to the victory right there. If you can get a win at 7,500 with wrestling in there, you're probably going to score 10x or more. So I'm fine with Zhumagulov. Maybe he's even my preferred play in this one because he's the underdog. I don't love a lot of underdogs on this card. I prefer him more than those KO or bust guys. And we got minus 200 the fight goes to a decision. If it goes to a decision, he's going to be live. So I'm fine with that. Definitely cool with that one. All right, next one on the card. We have the biggest favorite of the night, Jack Della Maddalena, minus 580 against Danny Roberts, plus 440. I definitely like Maddalena in this one. The only issue is that he's 9,600, which is hard to afford. And oftentimes it's priced out of the optimal lineup just because you just don't have enough to work with in the underdog range to get there. And if people below him score around him or more, then he's probably kicked off the optimal lineup. But he should have the skill edge anywhere this fight goes. Probably can get a finish anywhere it goes as well. So I like Maddalena in this one. Do you have any hot take on this fight at all?
No, I wish I did. I think that the only thing I'll say is that I think we've seen a little bit of susceptibility from Jack in the grappling. I don't think his grappling is anything to write home about, but his defense has held up to this point. It held up against what's the gentleman's name? I'm blanking on it. But anyway, it held up on the Contender Series. It held up in his most recent fight against Amiev as well, which was supposed to be the biggest test of it to this point. But it's not like he's not getting put in submission. So that's definitely concerning. when you see that from a fighter. But Danny Roberts, not a prolific grappler either. He's more so known for being a striker. He does have some grappling chops. He'll take the back at times in his UFC fights. He's not afraid to pursue submissions, but I just think that overall Jack is a big hitter, and Danny Roberts is having a real hard time taking clean punches at this point in his career. And it's been evident for a couple fights. He's taken some really bad, like heavy knockout losses. The Perry fight comes to mind. And I think that this is the kind of fight where Jack, I think a lot of people are expecting it to be early. I don't know that Danny is going to like quit. I don't think he's going to get hit with one punch and run away. He might land a couple decent strikes of his own, but I just think that Jack's going to be able to walk through his shots a lot better, going to be able to recover a lot better. When he hurts Danny, I think it's going to be the end of the road. I think he's going to be able to finish him. So I like Jack to get it done. I like him to get it done inside the distance. But to your point, if he's not getting it done in the first round, maybe he doesn't get on that optimal. But I also think, could I see a world in which Jack gets 3 knockdowns here and finishes Danny Roberts? Yeah, I could kind of see that too, depending on how he approaches it. If he wants to just like knock him down, follow him to the ground, he might finish him in round 1. If he decides, I need to get some cage time here and feel the octagon and drops the guy and lets him back up, which we've seen guys do a million times, then I think Danny Roberts is the kind of, guy who's willing to go out on his shield in a really bad way, pursuing the win. And, don't be surprised if he gets dropped, gets back up, gets back in his face, and then gets dropped again. So that's the kind of path for Jack getting to the optimal, is a couple knockdowns here in the finish. But I think he's the side here pretty clearly. And the lines are running away in a disgusting way to the point where it's almost unbettable.
Yeah, no doubt. I am going to be on Jack here. I think he's a cash game lock at -600. And if you can afford him in GPPs, then I want as much as I can afford, really. We have -200. Maddalena inside the distance, and he is +130 to win in round 1. He probably is going to score enough to pay off that $9,600 price tag. It's just that you got to hope that people around him don't end up scoring more. I'm cool with him if I can afford him. And then at the same time, I think Roberts is somewhat play as probably the lowest owned fighter on the card, like 5% owned. I think Sherman and Lewis will get a little bit of exposure on this card. So I don't think he's the worst pivot right there in a deep GPP, because if he wins, I would think it's probably a knockout, because he's a dangerous striker as well. The more experienced guy, the more octagon time. Wouldn't shock me to see him go out there and get a knockout. And if he is able to do that at 5% ownership, not only are you competing with just 5% of the card, but you've also killed off 50% of the rest of the card who had Maddalena in their lineup. So I'm not against Roberts as a deep GPP play, but pick is definitely going to be Maddalena in this one, and he probably rolls through them. All right, next one we have Muslim Salikhov, -115 against Andre Fialho, -105. This is really knockout or bust on both sides for me. They both have big-time power. They're live for the knockouts, but I don't see either one of them landing more than 1 or 2 takedowns throughout the fight. They're both low-volume strikers, so I just don't see how they even get to 10x in a decision. Do you have a lean in this one? Because I really don't, Liam.
I do think that Fialho is probably the side here. And I bet a lot of money on the Leech last time out. A lot of money against Muslim Salikhov. And it was because I felt like the writing was on the wall a little bit, where it was starting to get, slower reactions, more damage incurred, less damage doled out. And I felt like that was the kind of time when you got a really good opportunity to fade him. The Leech, better in the grappling overall, I felt like, more dangerous on the feet, bigger power, and had, a lot of UFC experience, way younger, all these things that you like. Fialho doesn't check all that same number of boxes, which is why I'm not as bullish on Fialho, right? The grappling, probably mostly a wash. I don't know that either guy's going to try and use it very much, but we have seen Muslim Salikhov just like single leg people from a snatch single and just sit them to their butt before pretty easily. He's just not good at controlling them. But Fialho is not that good at the grappling phases, through this point in his career. Could be a good way for, him to try and mix it up and make him tired. But outside of that, I just think Fialho is the bigger hitter. I think he's faster, and I think he gets to the target more. So I think that for those reasons, the younger guy with bigger power is probably going to win the fight by knockout, truthfully. But Muslim Salikhov is more skilled. We talked about before, skills win fights as well. So it's not an easy fight to project out. It's not as clear cut for me as the Leech, but I think that Fialho's the side here. I think the market's starting to reflect that as well. Muslim Salikhov is just very long in the tooth. He's been doing this for a long time. I don't think that he can do it as good as he used to. Whereas Fialho, if anything, you could expect some improvements from him. He said, whether you want to believe it or not, I didn't expect that guy, Jake Matthews, to stand with me. I thought he was going to want to wrestle and grapple. That's what I was expecting. And instead, he went out there and diddy bopped him. So I think that in this spot, he's coming back for revenge. And I think he's going to try and mercy kill the older fighter here and get him out of the division. And Fialho, in order to keep his spot, he's going to need to do that. So I think Fialho gets the win here, probably emphatically.
Yeah, he's my preferred play because he is cheaper. He's also got the better inside the distance line at plus 165 compared to plus 250 for Salikhov. I mean, I do worry about Fialho's chin. He got cracked against Van Camp, which isn't a good thing. If Salikhov hits him that hard, it's probably over for him. But it's just knockout or bust for both sides. I don't see either one of these guys ending up on the 100K lineup without a knockout. And I would rather just take the guy that's 10 years younger, that's $400 cheaper on DraftKings. So for me, it'll be Fialho or pass. And since he's an underdog who does have 100-point potential, I'll get some exposure to Fialho. But ultimately, I'm going to hope that this fight goes to a decision so I don't even have to sweat the winner because I don't have much of a lean, to be honest.
Fialho was my first pick. When I put together a DraftKings lineup, I literally, my first thing that my eyes were drawn to, I was like, Fialho 7,900? What? Give me that.
Okay. Well, I might smell a possible kill shot later. We'll see. All right. Next one on the card, we have Waldo Cortez Acosta minus 215 against Chase Sherman plus 185. I mean, I definitely don't love this line. We saw Acosta in there just a couple weeks ago against Parisian, I believe, and he got the win, but he only scored 59 DraftKings points. That same exact path to victory is in play here. If he doesn't get a knockout, he's probably only scoring around 60 points in a decision win because he's not super high volume and he's just not going to be looking for many takedowns. He's ultimately a striker. So if he stays on the feet, I just don't see him scoring well without a knockout. I would rather target the underdog in this case, the guy who is the higher volume striker, the more experienced fighter. And he's coming off a 100-point win in his last fight. So I'm on the Chase Sherman side of this one because of their prices mostly, but it's definitely not a confident feeling. Never like to be confident in a Chase Sherman. But who do you like in this fight, Liam?
I think that this is a really tricky one to call because of the factor you mentioned, which is Waldo just had a fight. And I'm not sure why he's taking this fight. I wish I had heard an interview with him kind of explaining his thought process here. But most of the time that I've seen this in the UFC, it's gone poorly. I think Lupi Godinez did a 21-day turnaround and got beat. I think that I'm trying to think. Michael Bisping did a quick turnaround, got knocked out in the first round. Like, quick turnarounds normally go terribly, terribly wrong for people. Now, Chase Sherman, he's had a lot of things go terribly wrong for him in the UFC as well over the years. Definitely shown a little bit more heart, better form, I think, in his recent performances. Who would have ever pegged Chase Sherman for going out there and getting a third-round TKO? I think that that would have been the last thing on their mind. He normally slows down over the course of his fights. And he's training with Henry Hooft and those guys. He seems to have made some improvements. I think that they're going to target the legs here early and often. The one thing is that gives me pause. It is this heavyweight style where if one guy is committed to throwing leg kicks the whole night, it is also going to open him up to just eat big counter shots that can rock him and finish him. And Chase Sherman has been knocked out a lot of times. So just like I have visions in my head of Chase Sherman on one foot getting put out by Waldo, throwing a big counter shot. But I also could just see that if this fight goes to distance, Chase Sherman just outlands him on volume. So it's a tricky fight, but I think at the prices, it's unbettable on the Waldo side, but I do think he wins the fight. I think he has more knockout power. I think he's got a little bit more upside, but I just don't believe in the pricing.
Yeah, the price is tough at 9,100. I would prefer to pay up for either of these guys. I would prefer to pay down for possibly, a Kennedy, Turcios, Hiestand. So not going to be a guy I make a point to get into lineups, but he does have knockout power. He's a big boy. He could get that knockout in any round. So I for sure will not be fading him. But I do like a little bit of Sherman exposure at 7,100. That's a cheap price tag. I think you're right with the leg kicks. I think he will be using leg kicks early and often, trying to slow Acosta down. And if he's able to slow him down, then I think he can pick up the pace and score well in a decision here, just racking up the volume. But most of his wins are knockouts. So if he gets a knockout here, he's got a good chance of being on the optimal lineup. So I'm going to go with Sherman there. Yeah, no real confidence. I don't have a bet on him, but he would be the value side, in my opinion. All right, next one on the card, we have one of my favorite fights for DraftKings. We have Kennedy and Nzechukwu minus 175 against Kutilaba plus 150. I'm going with the underdog in this one. I think that if Kutilaba wins this fight, he's got a very good chance of being on the optimal lineup, and he probably scores around 100 or more. So that's what I like to target. I love ceilings. I love when underdogs have 100-point ceilings. So that's what I'm picking here. But again, not a guy I want to trust very much. I don't trust him enough to even have a bet on him at plus 150. But he is my pick here. I think he will have the wrestling edge, especially early in the fight. He's also got bombs in his hands, could get a knockout early in the fight. I see him winning round 1. I see Kennedy winning round 3 if it gets there. So if it goes to the scorecards, it could come down to who wins that second round. I'd rather just take the underdog shot. But who do you like in this one, Liam?
Yeah, man. I think that Kutilaba is like your ideal DraftKings fighter because he is going to come out there guns blazing with everything he has in round 1, looking to get you that double points, bonus, early, first 2 minutes. Like he's looking to do anything he can for you in the first round. After that point, you don't get very much from Kutilaba. So, we've seen guys that have, submission games, guys that are clever, guys that are crafty, can grab a hold of this guy's neck. He's not very comfortable in submissions. He's not a great submission grappler. He panics. He gets finished. We haven't really seen a lot of that from Nzechukwu. I don't know if it shows it on the stats, but I would be sure that his submission attempt rate isn't very high. At 0.2, it's a little bit higher than Kutilaba. But Kutilaba's not out there to submit you. He's out there to take you down and bludgeon you with hammers. That's what he's trying to do. And he's very good at that. The one thing that I don't like about Kennedy and Nzechukwu is just he's very hittable in the early goings in the fight. He's a very slow starter historically as well. Done a little bit better job in his most recent outings, but just signs of hesitancy we've seen early on. And Daun Jung, isn't out there knocking out everybody in the first round. He's had a couple dicey fights with the likes of Sam Alvey, and yet he was able to put this guy down with a couple elbows and really awkward finish there. So I think that in this spot, Iwan Kutilaba is going to come out, throw bungalows at him for, at least 2 minutes. Then he's going to try and take him down and try and throw bungalows at him again for another minute and a half. So if none of that works, it's going to look really silly that we played Ian. But I think that, he's definitely the DraftKings side, man. And when I say that there was a person that was my first pick to click, this was my absolute last pick to click. But I did think that he had to make the lineup in the end just because he's a dangerous guy. He brings a lot to the table early. And this is the kind of, fight that's make or break for him. Again, another guy with a lot of losses. He's being positioned in the top of these cards. They're probably paying him all right as in terms of UFC mid-tier talent. So I think that he needs a win in this spot big time. And I think he's going to get it.
I love it. Yeah, he's going to be my favorite underdog on the card just because if he wins, he's going to outscore that 7,400. What's he at this weekend? $7,600, $7,400 salary. Like there's no way he's not getting over 10x that, but he's probably finishing the fight and he can score 100, 120 points and just break the slate. So Kutilaba will be my guy where I just don't have that same confidence where if Kennedy wins the fight, he probably gets a finish, but it might be later in the fight. And I don't know that he's going to outscore an $8,800 price tag. So this will be close to an all-in fight for me, but it'll be like Kutilaba in 50 or 60% of my lineup. So I'm going to really take a stand hoping that he can get it done. But I'll probably have Kennedy in the other 40% or so just in case. We got minus 330. Fight does not go to a decision. Good chance that it doesn't. So might as well just load up on this fight and the next fight and just hope that they end early. And that could be two of the guys that we need in our combos. But let's get into the main event. We got Sergey Spivac minus 195 against Derek Lewis plus 165. I don't see the judges being needed for this one. It's grappler versus striker in my eyes. Either we're getting a Lewis knockout or a Spivac, ground and pound or a submission on the ground. Or if it does go to a decision, I would expect it to be a lot of Spivac grappling. So I'll be on the Spivac side. I'm almost never on the Derek Lewis side. I don't care for knockout or bust type fighters in general. So I'm taking Spivac, but I definitely know the danger is there. Who do you like in this one, Liam?
I'm to this point undecided on the main event. But here's what I'll tell you. From a breakdown standpoint, Sergey Spivac has always lost to this archetype of fighter. Like, you just look at who he loses to historically. It's guys that are willing to go out there, not respect him at all, and swing heavies at his head and just land big shots on him. He's not very defensively sound. And so I think that Derek Lewis in some ways is a horrific matchup for Sergey Spivac. But on the other hand, they're like looking at Derek Lewis and trying to put him out to pasture in all of his recent fights. I've been making a lot of money. Like, I actually think by the numbers, Derek Lewis has been my most historical, profitable fade in the UFC. Definitely top 3. So just bet a lot of money on Tai Tuivasa against him. Bet a lot of money on Pavlovich against him. Thought that those were great spots, plus money on heavyweights that had better durability, as much knockout power. I was like, what more could I ask for, really? But in this spot now, I'm being asked to pay chalk again. And the last time that this happened, it was Dawkins, who was like the fresh young thing on the block, and he's got real boxing and real hands. I even bought into it a little bit. I think right before the fight, it didn't go up my track record, thanks be to the Lord. But I was like, man, I feel it. I feel like Doc is going to go out there and put a clinic on him. And Derek Lewis in this UFC Apex is undefeated. Derek Lewis in the small octagon goes out there and lands haymakers on people, and they have a hard time taking him down. Derek Lewis has always been a little bit easier to take down in open space, but then he has what I just call the Derek Lewis get up. He just gets up. He just decides, I'm done being on bottom now. And just stands up to his feet. Most people can't do that. But the guys that can, I said it about Montel Jackson last week. I was like, there's some guys that just decide that I'm done being on the ground now. I'm getting up, and they're up to their feet. Don't know how they do it, but God bless them for it. This is the kind of guy that I do see Sergey Spivac maybe gets a takedown. Then Derek says, I'm getting back up to my feet, gets back up and knocks him out. I could just see that happening. So I don't feel great confidence in Sergey Spivac here. I don't think he's like, a certainty to win this fight. I haven't seen his wrestling translate against these big fellas, except for like hitting a judo toss on a football player. So that was impressive. And I thought to myself, I was like, man, I thought Greg Hardy was going to beat this guy. Truthfully, I thought Greg Hardy was going to knock him out bad because he has a lot of the same attributes. He's a big guy. He's got a lot of power. He's heavy. He's not easy to take down. But when you get on top of Greg Hardy, the fight's over, right? Greg Hardy, if you get on top of him, he is literally like having an asthma attack. He's panicking. He looks like a white belt at jiu-jitsu class. That does not happen to Derek Lewis. He says he's the best blue belt in Texas, and I believe him. When he wants to get back up, he gets up. He's not easy to submit. Guys have had him in like full-blown Americana, key lock, like locked up thing, and he just pulls his arm back out. Doesn't make sense anatomically. It works for him. So I think Derek Lewis is just a unique athlete. This is the kind of fight that he does win. This is the kind of fight that Sergey Spivac does lose. But like, could I give you an analytical breakdown for why Derek should win? No, he looks washed. He looks like he's not fighting to his best of his abilities. He has 3 rounds of cardio, not 5. He only wants to be there if he's going to win by knockout. But can he win by knockout against Sergey Spivac? I mean, how can we discount that possibility? Sergey Spivac has lost to the Walt Harrises of the division. Is that Walt Harris's last win in the UFC? It really might be. And, RIP to like terrible tragedies around Walt Harris, all that included. But just like, he went out there and knocked him out in the first 25 seconds. Just easy money. Why can't Derek Lewis do that? Derek Lewis done that to a million people. So I do think this is the kind of fight that both guys, it makes sense for their career. One guy has a big opportunity to step up to prove he can beat this kind of challenge, but it's almost, for me, in the heavyweight division, until proven otherwise, this is the kind of guy that Spivac gets knocked out by. So I guess I just talked myself into it. I think Derek Lewis probably wins. But I'm not parting with my hard-earned dollars just yet. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that at all. I think Lewis is very live for a knockout, really, in any round. But I am going to be on the Spivac side. He'll probably be my highest owned fighter on the card. This is really just going to be an all-in fight for me. I want it 90 to 100% of my GPP lineups because I expect to finish. And I think the way that it doesn't end up on the optimal would actually be more likely with a Lewis win. Maybe he loses the first 2 rounds, gets a knockout in the 3rd round, and he scores 55, 60 points with that knockout. And that just won't cut it, especially because he's going to be over 30% owned. People know he has knockout power. He's super cheap. He allows a lot else with the rest of your lineups. So I'm just going to be really heavy on the Spivac side, who I think has the highest ceiling on this card. The guy who should not accept a striking match at all for any moment of this fight, but should be able to dominate every second that it's on the ground. So I'm going to go with Spivac to get the win. I think he gets a ground and pound or a submission in round 1 or round 2. You got something to add?
I was going to say the one thing that always stood out to me, I have like extensive notes on Derek Lewis. He's underperformed, in my opinion, every time he's fought a real striker. When Derek Lewis fights a striker, he doesn't like it because they hit him hard, because they are not afraid of him, and because they move out of the way of his shots. So he has a much harder time beating those guys. Cyril Gane loaded up on him against Derek. Like, there's certain guys that are just bad stylistic matchups. The guys historically he's done the best against are wrestlers. And it's a weird attribute, but just like him as an anti-wrestler, he's always been tricky. I remember the fight against Curtis is the last time that I like heavily loaded up on a fade where I bet Curtis inside the distance. I was like, man, all it's going to take is one takedown. But he waits. He doesn't even care about you punching him when you're a wrestler. He's like, yeah, touch me. But he's waiting for you to shoot so he can uncork this Marge Simpson just leaned over at the waist uppercut from Hades. And that's the most harrowing knockout in the history of the Apex. Go back and watch that. For minutes after, you can hear Curtis like, it's harrowing. I don't know how else to describe it. So, man, I can't bet against it at the Apex again. I don't think. I got to go with Derek Lewis, but I think all respect to the take, because if he gets put on the ground twice, he's probably going to quit, truthfully.
Yeah, and I was all in on Curtis Blades that one night, and Lewis ruined my night. It's happened multiple times before. So Lewis is not a good fade, that's for sure. And if you're picking Lewis to win by knockout, he should be the guy that you're going heavier on. He should be your highest owned fighter. But at the same time, you don't want to fade Spivac, because if he wins, he's probably going to score well. So just load up on this, like, go for it. But I did in cash games because they both have 0 point first, pretty much. Load up on that fight. All right. At the end of each card, we like to pick a kill shot, somebody we think will be a little bit overlooked by the public, but could be the key to the 100K lineup. You have somebody in mind for this card, Liam?
Yeah, man. I was going to go with Andre Fialho here. And I think that people, got a little bit hip to this guy at the betting window. I made a deposit at Bet Rivers because they had a plus 110 showing on Andre Fialho. And by the time that the deposit went through, it was gone. So I just was like, oh, all right, thanks anyway. I'll withdraw the money. We'll play again next time. But basically, I feel like Fialho can really surprise people this weekend, because people have this impression of him as he's not that good, and he's a little bit chinny and all these things. But I just think all the same can be said of his opponent, and he's the much younger guy. And we just see by the data, by the numbers, he's supposed to win this fight at a way higher clip than the odds suggest, just based on the fact that he's the much younger guy with big power, with better recoverability. Yeah, he's been hurt, but when he gets hurt, he normally recovers. Whereas what just happened to Muslim was he got hurt and he couldn't recover against Leach. And I think that gets worse. It doesn't get better. So I have a feeling that this might be, the end of the king of Kung Fu. I think he might get beat by a guy who's not the king of anything, who just swings bungalows at his head. And I think Andre Fialho, kill shot.
I like that. I think you've talked me into upping my exposure to Fialho. Been looking for underdogs on this card, so I'm cool with that. That went to a fight I was looking to fade, but now it's more maybe Fialho is somebody I want a little bit of leverage to. I like that a lot. I am going to go with the favorite on this card. I'm going to go with Natalia Silva. I think she can finish the fight in the first or the second round, whether that's on the feet or on the ground. So I'm going to take Silva, who I think will be around 10% or owned or so also, and just hope for that finish. But yeah, hopefully we're both right, and I'll get some combos with both of them in there. Maybe we'll be competing, tying even for that 100K prize. But hey, I appreciate you coming on the show this week, Liam. If you have anything you want to promote to the people, the time right now is yours.
Appreciate you, brother. I'll just say, if you guys want access, I do notes, extensive notes in terms of all the fighters, have stuff going back from the Ultimate Fighter House for Brady Hiestand, Turcios, and those guys, probably 10 pages of notes just from that show, for example. So I go pretty in depth. I have a lot of written information. If that's the kind of thing you're interested in, Delphi Sports, check it out. Ask me if you want more information. And otherwise, just Liam Picks Fights, third-party tracked. Just started tracking my bets on other sporting events on Action as well. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, find me everywhere, Liam Picks Fights. I'm always talking about fights, talking about bets, and that's all I do. So appreciate you guys. Any questions you guys have, find me there. Ask me. I'm always happy to discuss these things with you. So let's win some money this weekend. Appreciate you for having me, brother.
Hell yeah, man. Anytime. Good luck to you this weekend. Good luck to everybody out there. Go follow him and go win something. We'll see you guys next time.